What if the worst mistake of your life turned out to be the only thing that ever saved you? What if the night you were running from everything, from debt, from hunger, from a future that felt like a locked door, you climbed into the wrong car? Not just any car. His car. And what if the man sitting in the shadows of that back seat didn't call the police, didn't scream, didn't throw you out onto the rain-soaked street? What if he just looked at you? Calm. Cold. Curious. Like you were a puzzle he hadn't expected to find. Like you were the first interesting thing that had happened to him in a very long time. My name is Zara Malik. I was 22 years old, broke, exhausted, and completely invisible to the world. Until the night the world noticed me back. And trust me when I tell you, you are not ready for what happened next. Let me tell you who I was before that night. I was the girl who ate instant noodles 3 nights a week and called it meal prepping. The girl who wore the same 2 pairs of shoes, one for class, one for the part-time job at the campus library, and prayed neither soul would give out before the end of semester. I was a scholarship student at Harrington University, studying literature and law. A combination that people always laughed at. What are you going to do with that? Write legal poetry? Maybe. Maybe not. All I knew was that stories felt like truth to me, and law felt like armor. And growing up the way I did, in a 2-room apartment with a mother who worked double shifts and a father who left when I was 9, you learn very quickly that the world respects armor more than it respects truth. My mother, Fatima Malik, was the strongest woman I have ever known. She cleaned offices. She ironed other people's clothes. She smiled at women who spoke to her like she was furniture. She did it all so I could sit in a university lecture hall and become something she never got to be. I wasn't going to waste that. So no, I didn't party. I didn't date. I didn't do anything except study, work, and survive. Until that Thursday night in November. The night of the storm. The unexpected meeting. It had been the worst day in a string of already terrible days. Professor Hale had returned our midterms. I had scored a 94. Under normal circumstances, that would have felt like victory. But the financial aid office had sent me a letter that morning, crisp, white, bureaucratic, informing me that due to an administrative error, my housing bursary had been suspended pending review. Pending review. Which meant, in plain English, figure it out yourself for now. The review could take 4 to 6 weeks. I had $43 in my account. My campus housing contract required a top-up payment by Friday. I walked out of that financial aid office into a sky that had turned the color of bruises, and before I even reached the pavement, the rain came down like the sky itself was laughing at me. I had no umbrella. Of course. I ran. I didn't know where I was running to, just away. Away from the office, away from the numbers, away from the suffocating feeling of a life balanced on threads that kept snapping one by one. The rideshare app on my phone showed a car 2 minutes away. I booked it without reading the details. Black car. Luxury. The name on the app said, "Our driver." Strange name, but I didn't care. I just needed to get somewhere dry and think. The car was parked on Western Avenue, hazard lights blinking through the curtain of rain. Black. Sleek. The kind of car that didn't belong on a street like this. The kind of car you only saw pulling up to hotels where the valet wore white gloves. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside. Immediately, 2 things hit me. 1, the interior smelled like cedarwood and cold air and something darker underneath, leather and a faint trace of cigarette smoke and expensive cologne. 2, there was already someone sitting in the back seat. I froze. He didn't move. He was looking out the opposite window, one arm resting along the door, perfectly still. Dark coat. Dark hair. The sharp line of a jaw. A face that looked like it had been carved rather than born. Precise, severe, almost cruel in its symmetry. He turned his head slowly. Very slowly. And he looked at me. His eyes were the color of deep water, grey-green, impossible to read. Not angry. Not alarmed. Just assessing. "You're in the wrong car," he said. His voice was low. Unhurried. The voice of a man who had never needed to raise it to be obeyed. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Rain hammered the roof. I booked a ride, the app said. The app made a mistake, he said simply. This car isn't on any platform. I looked at the door handle. I looked back at him. The rain outside sounded like static. Get out, my brain said. You're soaking wet and it's 2 miles to campus and you have no money, my survival instinct countered. I'm sorry, I said. I'll go. You'll drown. It wasn't concern in his voice. It was just a fact. A simple, emotionless observation, like noting the weather all the time. He looked back out the window. Where do you need to go? I blinked. I'm sorry. You got in. You're wet. Where do you need to go? I stared at him. Every instinct I had, every story I'd ever read, every warning I'd ever been given, said, exit this vehicle. But his hands were folded in his lap. His posture was immaculate. And there was something in his expression, not kindness, exactly, but a kind of detached patience, that was almost more unnerving than anger would have been. Harrington University, I said. The East Gate. He said nothing. Simply pressed a button on the console between the front seats. A glass partition separated us from the driver up front. Through it, I heard nothing, no acknowledgement, no sound. But the car began to move. Suspicion and clues. I sat rigidly on my side of the seat, as far from him as physics allowed, my wet bag clutched in my lap, rain dripping from my hair onto the pristine upholstery. Don't look at him. Don't speak. Count the minutes. But I looked. I couldn't help it. Because something was wrong. Something beyond the obvious wrongness of being in a stranger's luxury car in the middle of a storm. His phone buzzed. Once. He glanced at it, just a glance, and something moved across his face. Not quite emotion. More like the shadow of emotion. A flicker. Then gone. He typed 3 words and set the phone face down on the seat. On his right hand, I noticed a ring. Not a wedding ring, wrong finger. It sat on his index finger, a flat black seal, the kind you saw in old photographs of powerful families. I couldn't make out the engraving from where I sat, but the design looked like a bird, or maybe a serpent. On the floor near his feet, I noticed a leather document folder. Closed. Clasped. But one corner of a paper was sticking out, and even in the dim light of the moving car, I could make out a word. Armistice. Which was a strange word to see on a business document. My literature brain filed it away immediately. Armistice. A formal agreement to cease fighting. A truce between warring parties. Who used that word in their paperwork? He caught me looking. Not at the document. At him. Because I had, without realizing it, let my gaze travel back up from the folder to his face. He didn't look away. Do you always stare at strangers? He asked. No accusation. Just curiosity. Only when they're in mysterious cars reading armistice agreements, I said. And then I wanted to die, because that was the most reckless thing I had ever said in my life. A long pause. And then, for just a fraction of a second, something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Almost. Sharp, he said. It sounded like a verdict. The car slowed. East Gate. My stop. I grabbed my bag. Reached for the door. Wait. I stopped. He was holding something out. An umbrella, slim and black, appearing from seemingly nowhere. It's still raining, he said. I looked at the umbrella. Looked at him. Don't take it. Don't owe him anything. Thank you, I said. And I took it. And I got out of the car. I stood under the umbrella and watched the black car slide into the rain and disappear. I didn't sleep that night. I told myself I would never see him again. I was wrong. 3 days later, I was in the university library, my safe place, my second home, tucked into the corner alcove with my contract law textbook, when I heard the door open. I didn't look up. I never looked up. That was my rule. But the cedarwood scent reached me before I saw him. He was standing at the entrance of the rare books section, the restricted alcove where only faculty and approved researchers were permitted. He was wearing a dark navy coat, no tie, a shirt open at the collar. He was looking around the room with the quiet, proprietary air of a man who was accustomed to belonging everywhere. His eyes found mine. Of course they did. He walked toward me. Unhurried. Like the library had been rearranged specifically for this path. He sat down across from me. "You returned my umbrella," he said. I blinked. "How did you?" "The front desk. You left your name." A pause. "Zara." The way he said my name was strange. Like he was testing the weight of it. "I didn't want to owe you anything," I said. "And yet here we are." I closed my textbook. "What are you doing here?" "In the restricted section." "I'm a donor," he said simply. "The Harrington Rare Texts Archive. Second floor, East Wing. My name is on the door, actually." I stared at him. "You donated the Karev collection?" "Yes." Karev. I knew that name. Everyone at Harrington knew that name. The Karev collection was legendary, over 3,000 rare manuscripts and first editions, donated anonymously a decade ago and only recently attributed. It had funded the entire restoration of the East Wing. "You're Alexei Karev," he said. "Watching me. And I know who you are, Zara Malik. Top scholarship student. Literature and law double major. Faculty advisor calls you one of the most analytical minds he's encountered in 15 years of teaching." The blood drained from my face. "You asked about me. I looked into you. After the car." He folded his hands on the table. "I found it curious. That you saw the word on my document. That you remembered it. That you were brave enough to say it out loud. Or stupid enough." "Perhaps," he said. "But I don't think you're stupid." I studied him. The perfect composure. The careful, calibrated words. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Really?" He was quiet for a moment. And in that pause, I saw something, just briefly, that looked almost like loneliness. "I'm not entirely sure," he said. And somehow, God help me, that was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in years. Secret revelation. We met 3 more times after that. Once for coffee, his suggestion, my reluctance, my eventual agreement. He asked me about my thesis. I asked him about the manuscripts. We argued about Dostoevsky for 40 minutes. I didn't realize I was smiling until I caught my reflection in the coffee shop window. Once in the library again, accidental, or so I thought. He was reading. I was studying. We didn't speak for an hour. But the silence felt like a conversation. And once, the third time, he walked me home in the rain. We stood at the door of my student housing block, and he looked at the building with an expression I couldn't quite name, and he said, "You deserve better than this." Not condescending. Not pitying. Just stated. "I'm working on it," I said. He nodded. Slowly. He left without touching me. Without even stepping closer. And I stood in the doorway for a long time after, heart beating in a way that frightened me. It was my roommate, Dina, who broke the illusion. She was a political science student with a talent for research and a deep, unnerving knowledge of the criminal underworld, an academic interest she attributed to her dissertation on organized crime in Eastern Europe. She saw the name Alexei Karev on my phone screen when he texted me about returning a book. She went very still. "Zara," she said slowly, "where did you meet this person?" "He's a donor to the library," I said. His Alexei Karev," she said. "As in, the Karev family." A cold feeling moved through me. "What do you mean, the Karev family?" Dina opened her laptop. Turned it toward me. The screen showed a European financial crime database. Academic access. And there, embedded in a research paper about transnational criminal networks, was a photograph. Him. Younger. Sharper. Standing with 2 older men in expensive suits outside what looked like a government building in Prague. The caption read, "Alexei Karev, heir to the Karev Syndicate, photographed in 2019. The Karev family controls an estimated network spanning 6 European countries, operating under the cover of legitimate real estate, art acquisition, and financial consultancy." I couldn't read the rest. "He's not a businessman," Dina said quietly. He's a boss, Zara. The kind of boss you don't accidentally stumble into. Except I literally had. Conflict. I didn't reply to his text. I didn't reply the next day either. On the third day, he texted once more. You found out. 3 words. Flat. Certain. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed. Is it true? His reply came immediately. Yes. Just that. No defense. No explanation. No manipulation. I called him. He answered on the first ring. I want to meet, I said. Not the library. Somewhere public. All right. We met at a cafe near the river. He was already there when I arrived. Already seated. Already watching the door. He looked the same. Composed. Still. Like the news hadn't shaken him at all. It had. I just didn't know it yet. Everything you read, he said, before I could speak, is accurate. My family built something I did not choose and did not design. I have spent 8 years trying to dismantle it from the inside without getting killed in the process. I stared at him. That's what the armistice document was. A fractional pause. Almost surprised. Yes. You're negotiating a truce. Between factions. Between my family's network and a group of people who want to be left alone. People my father wronged. He looked at me steadily. I'm not asking you to forgive what we are. I'm asking you to understand what I'm trying to become. Why? I asked. Why are you telling me this? Why me? He was quiet for a long moment. Because you got into my car, he said. And you looked at me like I was a person. He paused. You have no idea how rarely that happens. My chest ached with something I refused to name. I'm a student, I said. I have $43 and a suspended bursary and a mother who irons other people's clothes. I am not equipped for this. I know. Then why? Because, he said, and his voice, for the first time, was rough at the edges, I can't stop thinking about you. And I don't do things I can't explain. And I can't explain this. The rain had started again. Of course it had. I looked at the river through the window. Watched the surface break and reform, break and reform. If I walk away right now, I said, will you let me? Yes, he said. Without hesitation. And if I don't? He looked at me for a long, long time. Then nothing will ever be simple again, he said. But I will never let anything touch you. I promise you that. I should have walked away. I should have stood up, left the cafe, blocked his number, gone back to my textbooks and my instant noodles and my ordinary, fragile, manageable life. But something made me stay. Maybe it was the loneliness in him that mirrored my own. Maybe it was the way he'd handed me an umbrella in the rain without expecting gratitude. Maybe it was the word armistice, the truce, and the strange hope that somewhere in the dark architecture of his world, he was still trying to build a door toward the light. Tell me everything, I said. And he did. He told me everything. He told me about his father, the architect of an empire built on silence and fear. He told me about the night he was 17 and he watched his father make a man disappear, and how he stood at the window of that Prague estate and decided that someday, somehow, he would take it all apart. He told me about the years of playing the air, attending the meetings, wearing the suits, pretending. He told me about the documents, not just the armistice, but a series of agreements, testimonies, financial records, all of it being assembled quietly, carefully, over years. All of it intended for the right hands at the right moment. He told me that someone inside his own network had found out. That he suspected he was being watched. That the night I got into his car, the night his driver was running a decoy route specifically to avoid surveillance, had been one of the most dangerous nights of his operation. And I had thrown open the door, and sat down next to him, and looked at him like a person. They would have seen the door open, I said slowly. On surveillance. Anyone watching would have seen a girl get into the car. Yes. Which means. Which means, he said, whoever is watching me, is now watching you too. The cafe suddenly felt very small. For 3 weeks. My voice was barely a whisper. They've been watching me for 3 weeks. I've had people watching over you, he said. Quietly. You were never in danger. You should have told me. I was shaking, not with fear, exactly. With something bigger. Violation. Betrayal. Fury. You should have told me the moment. If I told you, you would have left. His jaw was tight. And you would have walked into the middle of this without knowing what it was. At least this way, you were protected. That wasn't your choice to make. No, he said. It wasn't. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. And somehow that was worse. I stood up. My chair scraped back. People looked. I need to think, I said. Zara. I need to think, Alexei. I walked out of the cafe into the rain. I walked 3 blocks before I realized I was crying, not with sadness, but with the overwhelming, suffocating weight of standing at the edge of something enormous and having no map, no guide, no reference point for what you were supposed to do next. My phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Miss Malik. We know about your conversations with Alexei Karev. We know about the library. The cafe. All of it. You have something we want. Not your life. Not yet. But if Mr. Karev does not hand over what has been building, we will use you to make sure he does. You have 48 hours to convince him. Don't contact police. They won't be faster than us. I stood in the rain. The umbrella, his umbrella, was still in my hand. I looked up at the grey sky. $43. A suspended bursary. A mother who worked double shifts. And now this. I thought of what he'd said. Nothing will ever be simple again. But I will never let anything touch you. I pulled up his name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. Because here's the thing about getting into the wrong car, about all the wrong decisions, all the wrong turns, all the moments where you chose a door and the door led somewhere terrifying and vast and beyond anything you planned for. Sometimes the wrong car is the only one that was ever actually going to take you somewhere real. I pressed call. He answered before the first ring finished. They contacted you, he said. Not a question. Yes. A pause. And then, quiet and certain as a locked door opening. I'm coming to you. Music fades in, something low, haunting, inevitable. And that, my loves, is where our story truly begins.